Well, Nancy, you're not limping. I don't see any scars. Thank you. She lost one slipper. Oh. How many of you were here last week? My goodness gracious, I'm amazed that you came back. I talked about giving. Do you not remember? No, anyway. And for anybody who's new here, I'd like you to know that that I talk about giving about once every 3 years, okay? And I'll explain a little bit why as we move along. Last week I talked about basically 4 myths of giving. The first one was that basically was that a tithe is 10% of gross income. That was a myth. That, as I explained it, that came from Old Testament. That does not come from the Christian scriptures per se. Jesus didn't teach it that way. He did teach, give and you shall receive. Most of us are taught receive and then I'll give, right? And so that was a little different, obviously. But it really is not an arbitrary number. What a tithe is basically what you are called to give from your heart. That's a tithe. For some people, it's 20% of income. For some people, it's 10. For some people, it's 7 or 8. For some, it's a flat amount. For some, it's giving consistently. Whatever it is for you is your tithe, not an arbitrary percent that somebody said you ought to give. And if you don't, you should feel guilty about it. You see, that's not the idea whatsoever. The second thing was that we talked about was if you give money, sometimes we expect money in return. So we give money because we want money. And the only challenge with that is that's not the way it works. If you give your money, you'll receive a benefit, but it may not be money. You know? I mean, when I first started tithing, I ran to the mailbox expecting that check because the minister said I'd get it, you know? And if that had been the condition under which I tithed, I would have stopped tithing because I didn't get any checks in the mailbox. My income didn't go up 10 times what it was. But what I felt was a peace in my heart that was more important than what I was getting in return. I didn't get to give. I just gave because I knew for me it was necessary. Your gift will grow tenfold. We showed a little cartoon last week, a little video, and you know what happens is your gift does not just grow tenfold. Sometimes it can grow 100-fold. It depends on where you give your money. It's according to how they use that money. It's according to what happens with those dollars. As you give here, for example, and you'll hear the announcement, there are some folks who are going down to North Carolina and helping people who were in tornadoes rebuild their homes. We've done it 4 times now. Some of your money goes to support that. Most of the people who go of their own free will, pay for their own meals, and there is a church there that puts them up in lodging. But can you see that the work that's being done here, because we brought that together, is more than tenfold? It's reaching numbers of people in Edenton, North Carolina. So our gifts don't just grow tenfold. And then give and you will solve all your money problems. I've heard that one. Give and all your money problems will just fade away. That's not true. I can tell you when I first tithed the first month, I thought I had more money problems. But I decided that I really wanted to continue to do that. That was my commitment at the time. I felt it from my heart. That's what I should do. So what I found myself doing the second month was I stopped going to Starbucks. I know that's a sacrifice. But I stopped going to Starbucks every morning as I went to the church. Instead, what I would do is I would save the $2 or $3 then, because I felt like it was more important to tithe. I just had to make a judgment as to how I spend money. I found myself more in tune with how I was spending my money, managing my money, so that within a couple of months, it did not feel like I was doing without. It didn't feel like I didn't have enough money. It felt like I had plenty of money. And then I got into that habit, and Vicki and I have gotten into that habit, and we always feel like there's enough. It's a real blessing in our lives. And so giving because you think you're going to solve your money problems is giving out of lack rather than out of gratitude. It's giving to get something, and a gift is given without any strings attached. Any strings attached. That's what a true gift is. And so we looked at those last week and a couple more. One of the things that really bothered some people was the idea that I said, we don't need your money. Some people said, what are you crazy? We need their money. I'll say it again. We don't need your money, and here's why. If that's what I preach, you see, I'm preaching a need. I'm teaching about a need. Right? And we don't live on needs. What we live on is the affirmation that there will be more than enough. Charles Fillmore said, I am, in a co-founder unit, he said, I am a child of the abundant God. I am a child of good. God is good, therefore I am good. And because I am good, good things happen to me. I can't explain why, but they just do. And when we think that way and believe that, we can step into, if you would, or the universe will attract to us our good. I think it's all around us. We just can't see it sometimes because we are trapped in our ego. Now, this week there are 5 myths, or 5, 6, and 7 I want to talk about. 3 different myths, okay? Then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how do we move through these myths? How do we change our minds? How do we become givers from the heart? Now, myth number 5, when I make more money, I will give more. When I get out of debt, I will start giving. Dave Ramsey, who teaches that concept, or taught that concept, has changed his mind on that. Because what he's learned over the years now is that from doing thousands and thousands of with folks of Financial Peace University, thank you. I was going to get the words backwards, but anyway, Financial Peace University, is that people don't all get out of debt, number 1. Number 2, we do live in a credit card society, and you can learn to manage your credit card, and that's what he teaches, but that what you do is you pay that credit card off at the end of the month. Now, technically, you are not building up debt, but what you're doing is paying off your debt. So in a sense, you feel like you're still in debt at the end of the month. And so people are saying, well, when I get out of debt, I'll start giving. And they never start giving in most cases because they've always got the debt to look at as an excuse. I think that's an ego excuse. That's the ego working on us, in a sense. And so as we look at that, what studies have shown is that as people get richer who do not give, they don't start to give at some point. You either get into the idea of giving because you want to, or you just don't give. You know, over my career in financial planning, I probably had about 5,000 clients that I worked with directly or indirectly. Certainly 500 of them directly were clients of mine over time. Over time, many of them were multimillionaires. Some of them made $1 million a year. And I would look on their tax returns, and the majority of them didn't give over $2,000 a year in gifts, making $1 million. Now, there's a reason for that. Either that wasn't important to them, and they didn't understand how important it was, or they were caught up in that idea of, as I make more money, I think I'll have more, but I never do. You know, when I was young in sales, that was a long time ago, and what happened was a guy came to speak to us, Phil O'Hara was his name. And Phil got up and he was talking to us as a group of new salespeople. And this is in 1968, 69, 70, something like that. And Phil said, and it caught my attention right away, because I want you to, for those who don't know, in 1970, $20,000 a year was a good income, a really good income, okay? And Phil said, the first year I made $20,000, I started to run around with $20,000 a year people. And he said 2 or 3 years later, I was making $50,000 a year. And I started to run around with $50,000 people because the $25,000, $20,000 a year people, we couldn't relate to each other. I was living a different lifestyle, and they were uncomfortable. I wasn't uncomfortable with them, but they were uncomfortable with me for some reason. And then when I started running around with $100,000 a year, when I started making $100,000, I started running around $100,000 people. And my friendships, because I changed neighborhoods, because I continued to grow. And I always thought I'd have more and more money. And last year I made $200,000, he said. Now, I was making $10,000 because it was my first year in sales. And I said, well, wait a minute, 10,000, 200,000, okay? That's possible. So it was a good message. However, what he shared with us was a more important message, and I wish I'd listened to it a little better, was that as he grew in income, he grew in lifestyle. As he grew in lifestyle, he created more debt. So he said, I know some of you are making $10,000 a year, and I know that you live as well as I do from the standpoint of managing your money. Because I'm making $200,000, and I got to tell you, I've got more debt. I have a higher lifestyle, and I have a tough time managing my money. Now, if you're sitting there making $10,000 and somebody says, I make $200,000, the first thought is they got it easy. But what he shared with us is he didn't have it easy because of the fact that he was wrapped up in the lifestyle. And then he started talking about giving to others, and he started talking, he didn't use the church, he said giving to others, and he talked about also about managing your money. Give the first 10% to yourself. So that as you grow in income, you give more and more to yourself so that you can do more for your family and others. That was the gist of his message. I've never forgotten it. I didn't listen to him very well. I wish I had, but it made great sense. But what really walked away with is the idea that when you make $200,000 a year, you have a $200,000 lifestyle unless you really manage that well and don't get caught up in materialism. And then what happens is you have the same issues and struggles you had when you were making $10,000 a year. No difference. And what I saw and what I experienced was people who were not happy, people who were dissatisfied, people who were scared, even though they had more than enough money supposedly. And I include myself in that group. So the idea that I'll give more as I make more money is a fallacy if one is not giving from the beginning. Unless something happens in their life and there's this transformation and it says, I need to do this. That's the fallacy. That when I get more money, I will give more. And so, what we have to do is find a different way of living our lives that is more fulfilling. And when we do that, we then start, I believe, to give. The second myth is test God and bargain with God. If you test God, you'll get more. My goodness, that's what Malachi said. God says, put me to the test. Find out. You give me money, bring it in the storehouse, and I'll give you more. It says before that in Deuteronomy, this is a law, you must not test the Lord your God. So which is it? Well, I think we know in unity that we don't test God. We don't even test ourselves. That we follow Spirit and we are guided to do what we need to do. And we're not in this process of being told what to do or feeling guilty about what we do. The whole purpose for these two lessons, the real purpose is please don't feel any guilt. Accept where you are. And then look in your heart and say, is that where I want to be? And stay. And that's up to you. Totally up to you. And so the idea is that I do not test God. What we do, as Paul says, we walk by faith, not sight. That we do not believe what we see what we believe. We step into what we believe. And when I do that, I'm not testing God. I am having faith and trusting in spirit. I am having faith and trusting in what I believe. I am having faith and trusting that God created me to become creative and to be a creator. And so that myth doesn't really hold much water as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'm going to get a little more personal. Myth number 7. I can't afford to give. A friend of mine called me in El Paso who was a tither, a little more than a tither, as a matter of fact. And she called and said, Richard, I need to talk to you about my giving. And I said, certainly. And she came over to church and we sat down and started talking. And she said, well, you know, the market's really tanked recently. I said, yes, it has. And she said, and so I'm not sure that I can continue to give. Well, it didn't make a lot of sense to me because I knew the person well, and I knew that she had a really good job in the hospital making good money. And I said, well, did you lose your job? Oh, no. The market tanked. I said, well, do you live on your investments? No. But it's affecting my retirement. She only had 20 years to go before retirement. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, well, I think I ought to start giving and start putting more into retirement plans. I got to have retirement when I get that age. And so we talked a little bit, and she had some knowledge of the stock market. And we talked about the fact that the stock market will grow by 7 to 10% over a 10-year period every year, no matter what years you use. You can figure that out. And we just chatted a little bit, and she said, what do you think I should do? And that was her mistake. Because I told her. No. I said, let me ask you a question. Do you think the stock market is going to stay down over the next 20 years? And she said, well, certainly not. It's going to go up and go down and go up and go down. And I said, is that going to affect your standard of living now? Well, no, because my money is all saved in the market through retirement plans. Okay. So what does that have to do with tithing? Well, the market's down right now. I said, but you said it probably will go back up, right? Yes, it'll probably go back. Well, do you trust that? Does history tell you that? Yes, history tells me that. So I said, it doesn't have anything, they don't have anything to do with each other. Some reason something else is bothering you. And you have to figure out what that is and make your own decision. So I did not tell her what to do in that case. Oh, I wanted to. But I didn't. And so she made the decision to continue to give at the same level. As a matter of fact, over the next 2 or 3 years, she gave a little higher. And what happened is she retired a couple of years ago, and the market was 18,000 when she retired. It was at 8,000 when she was talking about putting more in because it wasn't going to work. You see? So she trusted in the market. I would say she trusted in God to take care of her when she was ready to retire. That's what she ended up doing. And so the idea that I can't afford to give is said by Wayne Dyer this way. When you argue from your limitations, the only thing you get are your limitations. When I rationalize, when I create my limitations, the only thing I'm going to get is my limitations back at me. Jesus said, from everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required. And from the one to whom much has been entrusted, even more will be demanded. We are to be stewards of the good that comes into our lives, no matter what it is. If a child comes into our lives, we are to be good stewards of that child. We're to teach that child that they are loved. We are to teach them that they are loved and they are worthy of love, and we love them. That's being a good steward, a good parent. When I receive money into my life, I can be a good steward, or I can spend it all, or I can save part of it, give part of it, and spend part of it. That's the formula I happen to like. So, what we understand is that when you give on a regular, consistent basis, that something happens inside of you if you're doing it for what I would call are the right reasons in your life. I would suggest to you that as you experience a transformation of consciousness, and I'm not talking about giving here, a transformation of consciousness where you start to understand your relationship with God and God's relationship with you, that it's all one. that there is this Christ within each of us. And that because of that experience, we really, really at our heart are appreciative. And we want to walk the walk and experience life with that Christ consciousness, as that Christ consciousness. We want to be the manifestation of that Christ consciousness. And when we really step into that, when we are willing to say yes to that, when we're willing to what some call surrender, and I don't think it's surrendering, it's just using good common sense, when we're ready to make that move, then what happens is we feel at peace. You see, we get rid of two twin sisters. We get rid of the twin sister of worry and the twin sister of fear. Jesus said, whatever you worry about, you'll get. Think about that. Whatever you worry about is what you're going to get. That's the law of mind action. And whatever I fear, I may create even more of it because I spend my time focusing on it. So what I need to do is let go of fear, let go of worry, which is nothing but the ego at work within me. And when I let go of that, what happens is that I am able to be more at peace and to follow and discern what Spirit wants me to do. And when I can do that, then how much I should give, what I should give, and to whom I should give, I get the answers. I personally like to give to where I receive my spiritual benefit, my spiritual blessings. I also like to give to some organizations that I think do some wonderful work to help others. So I can make that choice, but I make it again out of the peace in my mind, not out of any guilt. I make it because it's the right thing for Richard to do, and I have no more right than to tell you what you should do than fly the moon. Only you can discern that. And whatever you discern is the right answer for you at this time. Do you understand what I'm saying? It really is the right answer at this time. I don't care what you do. And when you do that, what I have the faith is that you will recognize your abundance, you will feel your abundance, you will experience your abundance, you'll be grateful for your abundance, and when you do, you will begin to give. One person said if the ego is edging God out, it reflects itself most clearly by edging giving out. Just think about that. So what is the way through this? How do we move into a giving attitude? And it's not by saying, I want to get a giving attitude. That won't do it. Instead, it's by examining your relationship with that Christ within. Examining your relationship with who and what you are. Examining your relationship so that you say, you know, I am experiencing God day by day, not Sunday by Sunday. Moment by moment, not day by day. Not once a day. And I am a manifestation of what I think God is, which is unconditional love, which is compassion, which is understanding, which is the ability to create and be a creator. The power of imagination. That's what I think God does in and through me. And if that's what I believe, then what happens is I then start to live that life. And here's what I found. That as I start to live that life, I want to give. I want to share. Not out of guilt, out of love. That's what I want each of you to do, is to get to that point where you give out of love. You don't resent what you give. You don't feel guilty about what you do or don't give. You just give out of love and let it flow. And let it be what it should be for you. And so the secret, if you would, to abundant, meaningful living is that you always know you have enough. That you can say, I trust God. I trust the universe. I trust the laws of circulation. I trust the law of giving and receiving. I trust that there is cause and effect. I trust that I've been created in an image and likeness of God. When I can do that, I can stop worrying, I can let go of the ego, and I can step into my good. Jesus said, don't be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. We just have to open our hearts to it and our minds to it. There were two little girls, and they were with their dad, and they were fixing breakfast. And breakfast was just about finished, and Dad said to the two little girls, one was about 9 years old, the other about 6 or 7 years old, go get your mama and bring her to breakfast. And of course, as children do, they decided to make a race out of it, to make a competition out of it, to see who could get there first. And so they went tearing down the hall. And of course, the 9-year-old, who had longer legs and was faster and stronger, got there first. And the 6 or 7-year-old kind of struggled into the room. And when the 9-year-old got there, she jumped in her mother's arms, hugged her mother up, looked at her sister, and as she looked at her sister, she stuck her tongue out. Mother didn't see that. And when she did, she said, ha, 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 I've got all there is of Mummy. Little girl looked dejected, and her mother saw that her younger daughter was feeling some pain. And so she just patted the other side, put her arm out and said, come on up and cuddle with me. And the little girl got up and cuddled in her mother's arms and just felt the warmth and the love of her mother. And she looked at her other sister and she said, you may have all there is of Mummy, but Mummy has all there is of me. Now, move that to your relationship with God. When you embrace God, when you embrace Spirit, when you embrace that I am, you see, you understand, you start to know that God, Spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call it, has all of you. And that all is okay. When we are able to do that, we feel a longing to surrender ourselves to the indwelling Christ that says, trust me. Trust me. If you knew that every decision you made, there could be no failure to it, would you have any fear? Certainly not. If you knew that everything that's happening in your life is for your good, no matter what it looks like, would you be willing to walk through it, knowing that there was an end that's positive, that you would grow and you would transform? Certainly we would be willing to do that. That's what Jesus was saying. Trust me. I am one with you. You are one with me. Trust me. Be at peace. Be in love. Be a child of God and experience God personally. When you do that, you can feel no guilt. You can only discern what is yours to do in every phase of your life. So embrace God. And God will hug you back, I guarantee you. Thank you. Got to get the right one here. Okay, here we go. I got to welcome visitors. Anybody here visiting for the first time? There's several people here, okay? Now, I don't talk about giving